Welcome to Classical Chats. I'm Tiffany, I'm a classical pianist, also the host of this video series where I talk to all kinds of people who love classical music, anyone from professional musicians to everyday casual listeners. Today, it's very exciting. It's very exciting because we have Midori. Midori! If you remember from our very first fundraiser of Together with Classical, which is a non-profit charity dedicated to not only bringing everyone together in our shared passion for classical music, but also in supporting musicians and music education. Midori and Friends was one of the charities that we supported and raised a total of $12,000 for. So I'm very excited that we will have her share her experience with classical music with all of us today. She's not only one of the greatest violinists today, but also she does a lot of amazing work with community outreach, education programs, and also she teaches. I don't know how she is able to do so many things. Very excited to talk to her tonight.
Should we start? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I mean, it's late and I'm sure that you have many things to do and I guess you work really late, so thank you.
I work late because my students are now back in Asia.
Yeah.
So I often teach late at night, which actually gives me also during the day to do different things, to do my own practice, of course, and meetings and such. And so, yeah, I do teach late at night and I also teach early in the mornings.
I
But
don't
it's
know how you
okay,
do
it's
it.
working out.
Well, so a lot of people actually already know how amazing you are and the things that you do. So a lot of them ask like, how do you manage your time? So we're going to get into that, but I want to ask you the same question that I ask every single guest on Classical Chat, which is how your journey with music started.
Well, my journey with music actually started when I guess I was 4 years old, and that's when I started to take lessons. But I would say my mother is a violinist, so I always had music around me,
Mhm.
and my own instrumental learning started more seriously at age 4, but it was already there in my life. And I started because I wanted to play music. And it wasn't that I was introduced with the start of my lessons.
So you just one day decided that you want to learn a violin.
I was always listening to my mother practice and I was always watching her practice. And I used to listen to when she was teaching her students. And I felt very much like I was being left out if I weren't going to actually pick up the instrument and play. And initially, my mother wanted to see if I would actually try out the piano. But no, I wanted that instrument that she was always playing.
Ah, okay. But you never learned the piano, you only learned violin.
Not really. I play the violin and then I took some lessons in viola and voice and yeah, but violin is really my main instrument.
Yeah. And so you started studying, and then when did you realize that you want to perform? How did that uh
I think this performing was already happening before I realized that this was going to be something I really, really, really wanted to pursue as a career. My awareness of this being my career and also the responsibilities that come with having a performing career that came much later. I've always loved music. I've always loved to play. I loved being on stage. I still do. I think that feeling of walking out on stage, that first step, it doesn't change for me ever. And it's something I've always had. It's just a little bit of this pang of excitement that happens as I step out. And so I was doing that already, but I didn't make a conscious decision to take on music as my professional career until I was well into my 20s.
hmm,
And this is actually when I was trying to decide what kind of grad school I wanted to pursue, because I had majored in psychology, and also was very interested in gender studies. So at that point, I was trying to decide what kind of grad school I would pursue in psychology. And that's when I actually had to make a decision whether to learn psychology as something that was extremely interested in, more like general psychology, however, and not going for a combined master's PhD program, and do the general psychology, but then eventually go into music, or to pursue a double degree or a combined degree, which leads to licensing.
So, what made you choose psychology? Because that was probably one of the most important and also interesting thing for me to learn about you is that you didn't choose to study music. I mean, you did go to pre-college, am I right?
I did for about 4 years, 5 years, yes.
Yeah.
When I started at university, I went because I wanted to broaden my horizons and I had no idea what I wanted to study. I just wanted to be in an academic institution, broaden my horizons, and just to see different perspectives. And through the core curriculum, I had to take something in the social sciences. In the first year, you kind of just choose things, and some of them you really want to actually study, but some of them, okay, it's required, and somehow, you know, you end up with some things. And psychology was actually one of those where I had to take something in the social sciences, and I had no idea, but none of these, classes made any sense to me at that point because I was in my freshman year. So I just randomly, literally chose psychology and then realized how fascinating it was. And it was completely taking me over. It makes sense in retrospect that I got interested in psychology because I've always been interested in how the mind works. I would ask questions like, wait, why did this person feel this way and say something else? Or why did that person hearing the same thing react this way when the other person didn't? So I was always asking these kinds of questions. How does this make somebody feel? How does this person's feelings, how do these feelings of another person affect me? I was always interested in these kinds of things. So it makes sense that I got really interested in psychology. I think it was a sheer luck that I fell upon the requirement of the introduction to psychology as a social science core. But once I was in it, I was absolutely fascinated. And then it was very, very clear to me that's what I wanted to study at university. And when I first started, I guessed, although I didn't have any specific ideas, my guess was that I was going to major in something like art history or cultural studies, maybe education, or combined with education, something in the arts. But just just didn't happen. And psychology was absolutely fascinating to me. Then I also took another course, again, just because it was, I think in this case was just suggested because it was fitting well with my schedule and it was one of the required courses. And it looked good to me that this course offered trips to the theater. And I've always liked the theater. So I said, okay, well, all right. I'll take that course and fulfill my whatever that I needed to fulfill for the degree. And I, again, got really interested in the topic, and that was gender studies. And that's that's what happened.
But you really pursued quite far with psychology. So, what
I
made you
did.
choose concertizing despite going so far? Or maybe that it complements your career? Because that's a lot to juggle with studying and also concertizing at the same time.
I don't know what it is finally, ultimately, that made me decide and choose music. I am fascinated with the mind still today. I've always had music in my life. I think that I really wanted to connect with people. I like working with people. I like just doing things with people. And of course, I use what I've learned through psychology, what I've learned through university education in all aspects of my life. But I felt that concertizing and having a musical career was probably something that was going to make me utilize all these skills to the best sort of extent. And so that's kind of what happened.
Hmm.
I don't have exact reasons. I didn't have this moment where I realized, okay, I have to do this instead of that.
Right. Are there certain things that you can kind of pinpoint that you learned from your university education in psychology that you've been able to utilize in the music career?
First of all, I think it was really, really important for me to be able to learn how to do research. This has been extremely helpful. I'm not scared of having to do research. I'm not afraid of looking for information. And I love doing research
Mm.
and learning. I think organizing my time, I think balancing different multiple things, all these things. Of course, I was doing it also in high school, but it really went up that much more, I think, in university. Just having had that opportunity to be able to learn, to be in seminars, to be able to attend workshops, for me, it was just I took 5 years to get my undergrad degree, 5 years and 2 summers. But
But
I
still,
absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I feel like, I think it was a good thing that I didn't go straight from high school to university. I did take a couple years off.
mm,
And then I started at college. And also just that I was very open minded and I just sort of let this experience take over.
mm,
And so, and I think had I planned too much, I don't think I would have ever fell upon psychology
mm.
or gender studies. So I'm very grateful for the education that I received.
What are some tips that you would offer looking back, since you had the experience of managing so many things and studying and performing? What are some time management skills? A lot of people were very interested.
I think what I find helpful from the experiences that I've gone through in college is that once college was over, of course, I went to grad school. Then I started to teach, and I also ran a department, a strings department at USC Thornton School of Music before I moved back east. And I think just I got so used to doing so many things, and it trained me for an actual career in music.
And you also mentioned that you like to work with people. So is that how you had the idea for Midori and Friends? Because you had the idea at a very young age. So what was the inspiration for Midori and Friends?
The inspiration from Midori and Friends, I think, came from many different places. I think back in the 80s, late 80s, that's when I was just sort of starting to concertize quite a bit. I made my debut in 82, and I was surrounded by wonderful people, wonderful musicians, very respected people. And their concerns were that public education was really taking out, eliminating arts education, including music education. And hearing them talk about this and their concerns, I wanted to actually do something myself directly and to be hands on. And I also always had this passion, always, of really working hard and knowing also with my family how they always, when they committed to something, they were so committed to community, first of all. And once they decided that they wanted to do something, that they really saw through it. So I've always had that background in that I was always very driven to work with society, to work, for society. And then came this idea of or the problem that I heard about and that I learned about the lack of music education in the schools. And I thought about what music had meant to me, because I think music had given me so many opportunities. Music had made me learn so many things and took me to places psychologically, spiritually, and geographically, physically too. But it took me to so many different places that I've never, ever, ever even imagined I would without having been a musician. I thought about what this lack of music would mean for for students. And so I wanted to do something active. I wanted to do something proactive. I wanted to bring a change to the culture within the school. I wanted a systematic change. And so, in order to actually do that, I needed an organization. It wasn't just sort of just randomly visiting a school here and there, but I needed a whole organization and the organizational structure in order to be able to have consistency in bringing different programs. I might not be involved in every single program myself, but it's just as a combination of things, it's a very thorough program. And because I wanted to do that, I started Midori and Friends.
You're very hands-on, and it clearly you still are, because you also have the orchestra residencies program.
ORP, yeah, Orchestra
ORP.
Residencies Program. I have PIP, Partners in Performance. I have music sharing, yeah.
I mean, that's just I don't know how you have so many things going on at once, and you definitely are very hands-on. And I'm just very interested also in how you explain practicing and discipline to students and to young people, because that's something that was very interesting to me watching your Zoom sessions with ORP, was how you explain practicing. And I was just very inspired by your incredible sense of discipline. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's something that you were raised, and so that kind of got ingrained in you somehow. But yeah, what can you
Yeah.
say? Because a lot of people also were asking, they know you're a great violinist and they would love to know how you practice and how you manage your time to study and pursue music. So that was something that really stood out to me, was how disciplined you are and your practice tips.
Well, yeah, I think it's part of my personality, but I often talk about how practicing was never presented to me as something that would be fun. There was always a sense of respect. Whatever that practice was, whether it was me practicing, or it was somebody else practicing, or it was my mother practicing, and could be practicing medicine or practicing music or practicing anything. But there was always this respect in the family towards work, toward the work ethic, respect for the work itself and the process of working. And so it wasn't something I started as a hobby. I wanted to study music because I wanted to study it. I took it seriously. I wanted to practice it. And so with that was always this awareness that there is a certain responsibility, and that it's not something that I give up because I just don't feel like it that day, or I decide not to practice just because. And so I think it was always set up as something very, very important. It didn't have to be violin in particular. In my case, it was, but in the family, it didn't have to be particularly violin. But whatever this topic, thing was, and so I approached it as such. And I think one of the reasons why I didn't have this feeling of, well, I just don't feel like it today, so I'm not going to practice. I just expected that to be. And that was not the reason not to do it. So it was very much like work. Okay, you go to school, yeah, you have your favorite subjects, and you have your subjects that you're not particularly fond of, or you're not particularly good at, or you don't feel confident about. You still have to do it. And when it's expected, I think one doesn't always think. It's not a choice to consider.
That's interesting. So then how do you stay driven like that? Because not everyone has that feeling, of constantly practicing and knowing that it is work that you have to do. So that you keep saying that it's expected, but you've expected also, right?
Yeah, it's part of the way I was raised, of course.
So how do
But
you
of course now I think my love for music has grown.
mm,
And it was something that I had an intuitive feeling for. And I liked music always, yeah. But now it fascinates me. And it has become an intellectual fascination as well.
Hmm.
And of course, that gives me a lot of motivation. And I'm also very committed to social work. And because I love to work with people and how music can serve the people, how the music can bring people together, what music can do. And I've experienced quite a lot of different scenarios in which music has an effect, sometimes none, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. And so I think all these experiences also feed in to my passion of music and to passion for life. And I don't ever think that I do anything because I have to do it. I do things because I love it. I do things because it's the way it is. But I don't ever feel like I have to do it.
Because your passion is so strong that you don't even think about the opposite of not doing it. Is that kind of
I
how?
guess that's what it is. But yeah, I expect to do certain things, and so that's where it ends. And then okay, when I don't like something, I don't like something, and then if I decide not to do it, I don't do it. But something like music, which I love so much and which I've basically lived with, I never put it in that category of a choice of liking or not liking at this point.
That makes sense. So, what piece of advice would you give for someone either studying violin or studying music?
Well, it's difficult to give
I know it's a very general
general,
question.
yeah, general
So
sort
feel
of
free to narrow
advice.
it down. Yeah.
I think I think that it's important to really, it's okay, sometimes if you have other interests, it's not like your passion for music doesn't have to be shown by your being tied to the violin 24/7. It's not like that, but it's really more your sort of relationship to it. And what I get to do with music for me is very precious. And I think that I don't really have an advice, but I think music is something that is beautiful, that can actually have wonderful effects. You don't have to be a professional to enjoy the music. You can be a wonderful listener, you can be a wonderful player, but I think sometimes there's a misconception that if you play really well, then you must like music. It doesn't work that way either. So I think really the question is, is this something I'm passionate about? Is this my passion? It's not the same as the everyday liking or disliking, but is this my life's passion? And it could be anything, but if it is the violin, then by all means, I think one has to actually commit to it.
I like that. I think for the actual episode, I will kind of have that as the last part. But I wanted to ask also one more thing is about research. You say you love research, and that kind of skill has kind of transferred to your music career in some way. So, how do you approach a new piece of music? Does research play a huge part of it in the process? I guess.
I think what happens is that you start to appreciate information so much, and you also appreciate the things that come along with research. So you don't just look for one piece of information and get that piece of information and that's the end of the story. It doesn't work that way. I think that my curiosity is really, first of all, I'm in the habit, if I don't know something or I feel I have a question about something, I look it up. And it's very natural for me to look it up. And I'm very fortunate to have an idea where to start looking for things. So, I have access to methods of research, which I think is really nice. And now all these things are on the internet, but used to be you had to go to the library and you have to know which area and all kinds of things. But yeah, I think having done that, it really opened up my mind. And it's not just one thing, but you learn so many other things, which also then widen your horizons for more curiosities and more questions. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on from there. And I think that when I'm, you know, doing something administratively or whatever it is, I think one discovers many different ways of looking for information. And I I think that if you don't have that skill to do the research, then you can't look for new ideas. You can't find information. You can't find answers. And so it just keeps me more motivated and engaged in life this way.
Hmm, interesting. Is there a particular method? I mean, nowadays it's kind of, you go on Google, but is there a particular method? Because you said that you had a lot of different methods that you learned. And
Yeah, and then, well, the way you search, and if it's on the internet, how you actually put in the search words, and all these things, it starts to make a lot of sense with experience.
that makes sense.
And you start to look, you catch one word or you catch one website, and then you go in from there, and then you go to many, many different places.
Yeah. Are there certain places that you would recommend? I mean, I don't know if there is for music research that you kind of
Not particularly. One just basically, sort of like a hands-on, yeah, grassroots research.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll end on this one. Someone asked, where do you see classical music going in the future?
That's a very interesting question, especially to be asked this question today,
Yeah.
and with the pandemic and all things going on.
Yeah.
I think that in general, this is what I would say, that live music has become even more meaningful for many people. We have discovered many different ways, actually, of new ways, socially distanced ways, technological ways to have music in our lives. And that's great. But then that doesn't erase this live music capacity. And I think in a digitalized world, it becomes even more important to have that human connection, that direct connection, and live music being having that contact, live contact with music, perhaps even with composers. When we play pieces by Mozart or Beethoven, we're talking about connecting with a composer who lived 250 years ago. And to have that direct touch, I think this has become much more, well, impactful, more meaningful. So I see that there's going to be a different placement of live music in the future, perhaps. And I think I'd like to think positive that it's going to go in the right direction, in the good direction. And we also have availability of all the wonderful new ways, new methods of bringing music to people.
A lot of it is through social media and through internet, but yeah, definitely live music. It's much more special now to play in-person concerts. When is your next one? Because I know you were supposed to travel, right?
Yeah, I just played yesterday. I just played yesterday
Ah,
for a
okay.
streaming concert in New York. I'm off
Nice
to
to congrats.
Istanbul.
Ah,
Yeah, possibly off to Spain after that.
oh wow. I hope your travels will go well.
I hope so. Same to
Yeah.
you, Tiffany. I mean, yeah, everything is. This has been difficult partly because of so much sadness around us and just in turmoil. I think our sort of surrounding, atmosphere, mood is one of such turmoil. And of course, personally, also not to have a clear idea of what's happening, and it's like not knowing. I keep asking myself, is there going to be tomorrow sometimes, and it's a little bit better now. When I used to hear the sirens all the time,
Yeah.
I just used to ask, the sirens went 24/7, and at night I would just sort of listen to it, and is this ever going to come to an end? And it was a very difficult time. It was a very dark, it's still very dark, but it was particularly dark in April and May.
Yeah.
And yeah, and having, it's an experience that we're never ever going to have again, I hope. And I hope we can make it so that we won't have to live through this again. And if we can do anything to prevent this from happening again, or to actually really bring together people and reconcile, the turmoil that we have and the divide that we have, the lot to close the gap of, having lost things, and it's been very very hard. The experience, the mundane things, even like just waiting in line for 2 hours to get into the supermarket, and you get in, there's nothing left anymore. Just I just hope that we're going to learn from this, and that we can do the best we can to really come to reconcile whatever we lost, alleviate the pain for those who are actively, immediately right now feeling the pain. And so we'll see how we can actually be helpful, and we can be of support to each other. But yeah, it's hard to know what's happening, what's next. And yeah, on a very sort of practical level too, it drives me crazy. It's like sometimes I get a notice, like on a Thursday, and then I'm leaving the following Tuesday, and then in between those days I have to get my visa, and I have to get packing, and I have to practice, and I have to get everything in order. In practical level too, it's a little crazy.
But you've definitely had the experience to deal with kind of chaos and all of that overwhelming work. I think you are very good at organizing your time and kind of managing so many
Well,
things.
I'm good at organizing if I know what's happening.
Yeah.
But when I don't know what's happening, it's not so easy to organize.
Yeah. Definitely, that's how I felt last week, I guess, or 2 weeks ago, and I
Yeah.
didn't really know if I was still going to Salzburg or not. But yeah, but I guess we have to stay positive and hope
Yes,
we
for
can.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I really hope that we can come together and, yeah, try to work for a better future.
I hope so too. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, you make it very easy to talk,
Oh,
Tiffany.
by the way, congratulations on your album. I saw
Oh,
you had a new album release.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was the last thing I did before the shutdown, before the lockdown.
You want to talk anything about it, actually?
Sure.
It was the yeah, I was so excited when I saw that and the timing of this episode coming together and your album release. Do you want?
Sure. We can talk about it.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
recorded. I think you recorded Beethoven, right?
Beethoven Concerto and the Two
Yeah.
Romances. It was Festival Strings Lucerne, and it was really, really, really nice. And in retrospect, now when I think about it, this was the last thing kind of that I did before the lockdown. And the concert that was supposed to happen, it was originally a concert that we were going to record, but the concert we were rehearsing already, and the concert got canceled, because it was because of the pandemic. And so the concert was canceled because of the pandemic, and we were somehow allowed to, we were given the permission to go on with the recording. So we ended up doing the recording, and this became something, now I think about it, that was like, well, yeah, like 8, 9 months ago already.
Mm.
And it's that was when the world changed. That was, after that was a total change. So, but I've always loved Beethoven. I thought about Beethoven a lot during these months. Of course, it's the Beethoven year, and with the 10 sonatas and all that, it's so much Beethoven. And I started, of course, the first of the year with Beethoven. It was like Beethoven, 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 until the lockdown. But of course, when you think about his life, he had many struggles, he had many disappointments. Like many of us, I think his life was full of exciting things as well as very low points. And maybe in some cases, we can say that his low points were very, very low, maybe lower than many of us, with his psychological state and such. And he also had very strong vision for the world. He had a very strong idea of how he wanted the world to be, and I'm sure that the world around him wasn't exactly that, and that's why I think there might have been a lot of struggles and disappointments and such. But then, how does he? You listen to his music; it's so incredibly beautiful. Sometimes there's a lot of hope, and it's incredible music. And I kept thinking, how did he not lose faith? How did he not lose hope? It was what was going on in his life around him, and keep writing this wonderful music. So this was something I thought about a lot during the lockdown, the first lockdown, and yeah, it's just gives us the inspiration, gives us the energy, I think, to strive, to thrive and to work towards the future.
So it's become a very symbolic recording to come out.
It became that. It was never meant as such, but it became that.
But sometimes these coincidences are just accidents are very meaningful. It's very special this way. And you played wonderfully, of course. And actually, some people had already mentioned, oh, yes, of course, Midori. Just listen to her Beethoven. So I'm very excited.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you too late. Do you have...
Okay. I have to teach in 10 minutes, so I'm going to get something to eat. Yeah, well, in Asia, it's the time difference.
You teach to like midnight? It's like
yeah, I'm going to teach today until about midnight. Yeah.
This is why you're very inspiring to me. So I'm very glad that I got to meet you through this crazy pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to see you, Tiffany. Keep well, okay? Stay safe, yeah?
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
She's so sweet and lovely to talk to. I am very excited that we got this opportunity to talk, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe. I can't wait to invite hopefully more people like her to come on and share their experience with classical music. It's just so wonderful to have this platform here. So thank you very much for subscribing and for supporting Together with Classical. I will see you in the next episode.